Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to another podcast of MuslimFin. Last week, we looked at how to open a current account or bank account, and it's not just a bank account, an Islamic bank account. And what normally happens, or the normal question after opening up a banking account is, can I open a savings account? Now, savings typically dissects into a couple of spheres, most notably either cash savings or savings in the market. So for today, we're just going to focus on the basics, and we're going to look at Islamic savings accounts, specifically under Sharia banking. So I'm not going to go into too much detail. I'm going to hand over to Siraj, who will take us through a little bit more detail on savings accounts. So Siraj, from my knowledge, I understand that savings accounts exist in the banking world, and it also exists in the Islamic banking world. Can you take us through a few basics of what that savings account entails, and just generally how can the general folk go about opening up an Islamic savings account?
Alhamdulillah, Shamir, Shukran. I think last week we touched on the Islamic check account and how do we go about opening an Islamic check account. So it's a very similar process when it comes to Islamic savings accounts, but savings accounts in general is less stringent in terms of the requirements from banks. So normally from a check account perspective, clients would use a check account for their salaries. They would attach debit orders to that, etc. But a savings account is a bit different in the sense that you wouldn't need perhaps a pay slip to open a savings account. You would just need your normal documentation, such as your ID, proof of address, and perhaps a opening deposit amount to activate the account. So, and that's across whether it be an Islamic savings account or a conventional account. But if we just look at the definition of an Islamic savings account, and our audience can check it out on our website on www.muslimfin.com. And it says that an Islamic savings account functions like a conventional savings account, but obviously operates in compliance, with Islamic principles. So from a savings account perspective, I think the primary purpose of a savings account is to provide our clients with a safe place to deposit their monies and then to earn a return in the form of halal profits without violating Sharia principles or restrictions in terms of riba and unethical investments. So alhamdulillah, if you look at the South African market and the institutions out there, the banks, alhamdulillah, you can find it quite widely at some of your bigger banks, your smaller banks as well. So people would use savings accounts, whether it be to save for short term or for long term, whether they're saving to, for their kids' education, whether they're saving for Hajj or Umrah. But the idea is to save money, but from an Islamic perspective, just to ensure that you earn a profit and not interest, you're not involved in interest. So in a nutshell, that's what a savings account is. But you do get different types of savings vehicles within Islamic banking and finance, and perhaps we'll touch on that as we go along.
Okay. Thank you for that, Shariah. So typically in the banking world, you'd get something like a normal savings account where you put money in and immediately take money out. Then you get like a 32-day account and perhaps a fixed account amongst a few that is offered in the cash environment. Are those accounts replicated or offered, or similar accounts of that nature offered under the Islamic banking offering?
That's an excellent question, Shamim. So, what the institutions have done was they've looked at the market and they've seen, what are the traditional accounts out there, or savings accounts, or saving vehicles or mechanisms out there, and how can we bring to the market a Sharia compliant version of those? And what you've seen was a lot of these Islamic institutions have now sort of mirrored what you can get from a conventional perspective. So if you're talking about a savings account, a typical savings account where you can save your money, but access it whenever you need it, that's great, that's available. But it's also mirrored some of the other type of investments where you're looking to invest long term, in the sense that you maybe want to fix your funds for a certain period. And then, get access to it once that period expires. So, alhamdulillah, in terms of flexibility, I think Islamic banking is on par with conventional. And you also have the opportunities or the flexibilities when it comes to savings accounts to have your profits either paid out to you on a monthly basis, or you can have your profits roll up every month and then have that profits paid out, at the expiry date or when that term expires. So alhamdulillah, from a market perspective, I think our Muslim community is quite covered. Alhamdulillah, these products are available to the bigger community. And again, even from a return perspective, if you had to compare the Islamic savings account to the conventional account, your returns are quite similar. The only difference is from a Sharia perspective or from an Islamic savings account, your profits are halal, as compared to conventional where you earn interest. So it's great to see, these products evolving as we go along. And, the banks and the institutions are continuously bringing more innovative products to the market. Just, from a comparison perspective, again, whatever you can find out in the market from a conventional perspective, there is a Sharia compliant alternative available to our communities.
So that's the cash deposit accounts. And so for some people, they would like to take on a little bit more risk, which could potentially give them a higher return. And that we know is not necessarily offered in the cash deposit world. And I think this is more offered in the space where Ali comes in. Ali, on your experiences or the space that you cover, are there Sharia compliant investments outside of the cash deposits? And in what shape or form does it take?
Yeah, thank you. That's a very good question, Shamim. I just want to go back and maybe this could even be a question to Siraj. And then I just want to put this out there. Just in terms of cash, what we should always think about is the fact that the Islamic bank or Islamic banking window has its own treasury, right? The fact that it has its own treasury means that the funds held within the treasury are held completely separate from the conventional bank's funds, or in the cases of a fully fledged Islamic bank, the funds will never be mixed with any other conventional monies, right? And also in the same sense with the Islamic banking window. So by opening up a savings account opening up a savings account with a bank, what ends up happening is that you become a shareholder of the bank, right? Or of that Islamic window. And by becoming a shareholder of the Islamic window, the Islamic bank is then able to lend money, the money that you deposit into that savings account, and they are able to generate profits, and then of the profits, you then share in a percentage of the profit. So when, Siraj mentions profits, sometimes it's hard for, the community to understand, okay, well, what's the difference between profits? But how is that actually generated and how is it actually made? Is my understanding of that correct, Siraj?
I mean, that's actually a very, very good point you bring across. So when a client does invest or opens a savings account and deposits their money with a bank, from an Islamic perspective, that is seen as a partnership. So whereby you as a depositor, you have the funds to invest, and then the bank acts as the specialist in terms of knowing or understanding the market, where to invest your money, and then together making the return, and that return is then split between the bank and the client at a agreed ratio in terms of the profit share. But again, you also make a very good point in terms of, people are obviously are asking the question, look, if my returns are very similar to interest, what's really the difference? How is the return I'm generating on the Islamic savings or investment different to the interest that I'm earning on the conventional savings and the conventional investments? And that really comes down to the type of activities these Islamic banks and windows operate in. So again, from a Sharia perspective, there's very little restrictions for conventional banks in terms of where they can invest their funds and where they can get returns. From a Sharia perspective, we are a bit more restricted in the sense that we won't, from the Sharia law, we can't invest in activities such as gambling or casinos. We can't invest in, for example, the pork industry, or we can't invest in some cases in arms or weaponry. So when when we invest our money with Islamic banks and the banks act as a specialist, they will ensure that where they invest their funds, they will invest it in activities that are Sharia compliant. So they will invest either in properties or commodities, buying and selling. And, when they sell at a profit, that profit then gets split between the client and the bank at agreed ratio from a profit margin perspective. And again, you also touched on the treasury point of view. So when it comes to Islamic windows, and we've mentioned this before, so an Islamic window is a conventional institution that offers a Sharia compliant product. And it's a very important point you mentioned about treasury is that an Islamic window normally has its own treasury, or it has a separate treasury from the bigger bank. And this again is just to ensure that the funds don't mix with the bigger bank's funds in terms of where the monies are invested, in terms of the interest, in terms of return. So again, from the Islamic treasury point of view, they've got the Sharia board and the experts that manage that treasury, and they ensure that the funds that they use it for are Sharia compliant. And again, those profits get shared amongst the client depositor as well as the bank at an agreed ratio.
Excellent. And I wanted to bring across that point firstly before I moved on to your question, Shamim, because I wanted to make the clear distinction between a banking savings product and when you move into an investment product. Okay, so where you would refer to one of the products that are on the bank's what they call balance sheet, right? Where they can actually use those funds to lend or use those funds to potentially reinvest and then make profits, for the shareholders in the bank. The other, what they call near cash solutions, and then we start talking about other asset classes. It's also seen as quite safe and quite secure, but here you are taking a bit more of a risk. Remember, in Islamic finance, whether it's in cash or near cash, there's no guarantees really. But what ends up happening is that the bank is able to, or the Islamic window in many cases is able to absorb some of that risk. Okay, so the profits that are being paid out to the person that is putting their money in the savings account, in many cases, the bank absorbs a lot of that risk. So there is a risk attached to it, but you would never really experience that as someone that's putting money into your savings account, because they can absorb some of that risk, and then they are able to say to you, this is the type of profit share that you can experience. However, when you move on to solutions that are off that balance sheet, and we start moving away from solutions that are issued by the bank, and now we are offering a investment solution, a unit trust solution, then now we're talking about different criteria, right? This is now heading into the world of advice. It's a completely different world, and I'm sure that there's going to be more of these podcasts where we're going to be discussing this as well. But what we can say is that the majority of the exposure within these types of income solutions, or what they may call stable solutions or near cash solutions, and these terms are used interchangeably, right? The asset classes, and the asset class would be, it could be, for example, shares or stocks or equities. And in the Sharia compliant world, it would also be sukuk. The term sukuk is, if I could easily explain it, it would be, where governments would issue debt, and that's called a bond, okay, or a treasury. And then if you give the government some money, then they give you a yield, okay, or a return for that, or you give a company some money, and for that money that you borrow them, they give you a yield. The sukuk is the equivalent of a conventional bond. It's a Sharia compliant version of a bond. And what you can do with sukuks is you can create a form of fixed income, where the sukuk is, like Shariah said, is in the underlying investments. Remember that the investments have to be backed buy an asset, right? There has to be a tangible asset. In certain cases, the tangible asset itself could be a share or a stock, or in some cases, it could be commodities like oil or wheat or barley or gold or any of those, or a multiple of commodities that back those sukuk. And then what ends up happening is over a certain period of time, so what they call duration, and I don't want to use too many big terms here, but duration would be term, right? So you could say, a bond or sukuk could go out 1 year or 3 years or 5 years or 10 years. And for you locking in your funds for a longer period of time, obviously you are going to get a better return. And so what the portfolio managers of these funds do is that they would have various duration of sukuk. So they would have some sukuk within the portfolio that's 1 year, some that's 3 years, some that's 5 years, some that's 10 years. And as they come to maturity, it creates what they call liquidity in the product, right? So now what that allows for is if I put my money in and I want to withdraw money from that, right? Because I can withdraw from my savings account at any point, right? There's liquidity. So what I want from a near cash solution is I want maybe a better return that maybe is offered by the Islamic bank or the Islamic window. I want to maybe beat out that profit share. Okay, so I go and I take a little bit more risk. But in order for me to be able to withdraw my money, there needs to be a certain amount of liquidity. And through that process of having various terms for the sukuk product, they are able to create, or the portfolio manager is able to create liquidity within that product so that the investors are able to draw. Okay, so there is a difference in a banking savings account or a banking term deposit account, Shariah compliant savings and Shariah compliant term deposit account, versus something that is an investment that is off balance sheet, where you purchase units of a portfolio and you are able to potentially beat out the returns that are offered on the banking side. So I hope you guys followed that, but if you have any questions, let me know.
Ali, I know that was quite a mouthful, and quite informative at the same time. And as we know, if you want to diversify balance sheet or keep up with or beat inflation, you're going to have to step into the space that Ali oversees. And that in itself is an area that has a multitude of avenues. And although that information that Ali brought over came over as a mouthful, it's probably only the tip of the iceberg. And on that note, I think it's safe to say that we probably need an episode on its own just to cover the investment side of things. It is an interesting and informative area, and we hope in the future that we can unpack that in a bit more detail. I know Ali was strapped for a short period of time, and he was trying his best to keep it in play. But thank you for that thorough detail, Ali, in that short space of time that you were able to give us that information on the investment side. Something that I'd like to explore as well with your guidance. But hopefully in the next episode we can unpack that in a bit more detail. Over to Nawaz. Nawaz is the tech guy, tech/software developer on the team. And there's a couple of questions and experiences that we'd like to hear from him, specifically on the savings and investment side. It seems that he has not saying this in a disrespectful way, but seeing that he has a non-finance background, I think he's the perfect person to answer the questions that I have in front of me. So Nawaz, without further ado, we're talking about savings and investments, or savings of cash deposits and savings in the market. With your experiences, are you familiar? Have you experienced? Are you aware that these products exist out there in the financial world?
Actually not. No, I actually don't know. But I do have a few questions, because I think I lost you at the beginning of this podcast. It was so much, but very interesting words that was played around. Just from my understanding as a non background finance banking person, is you guys used a term savings pocket and a savings account. So if I have a check account and I have a savings pocket linked to my check account, is that the same thing as what you explained at the beginning of a savings account?
Correct. Now, that's actually, you got the right understanding. So literally what the banks have done was, and it's just an innovative play where they've just they've linked your savings account to your check account. So that just makes it easier for you to transfer between the two. Also, I know some of the institutions have these automated processes in place where they could bank your change, as an example. So if you're buying something from 100 Rand or something from 90 Rand, and you pay with 100 Rand, they will then take the 10 Rand and then automatically move it to your savings account. It's things like that. But one thing it's important to note is that you'll only be able to link a Sharia compliant savings pocket to a Sharia compliant check account. So it doesn't make sense. It will be contradictory if you had a conventional check account with an Islamic savings pocket. Because the idea is to ring fence your funds, just as the bank has its own treasury that's ring fenced. But the idea is to ring fence your funds to ensure that your funds are Sharia compliant. It doesn't get mixed with the bigger banks, activities with investing, etc. So from a Sharia perspective, um, your check account would need to be Islamic as well as your savings pocket as well.
Okay. Shukran for that. Okay, so the second question I just want to know is you used the word window, Islamic window. I'm assuming that's not a window that is an actual window. When you open it, there's a star in the moon. So can you explain just briefly what you mean by an Islamic window? Just for my understanding. Quick.
Okay, cool. Ali, you don't mind, I'll take this one quickly as well.
Yeah,
So
please.
an Islamic window, is normally or usually a conventional institution. So a normal traditional, and let's say a bank. We've got our big four banks and we've got some smaller banks. So what an Islamic window is any conventional institution or financial institution that offers a Sharia compliant product. So remember, the institution or the bank or the finance house is not a fully fledged Islamic entity or company, but they do offer a Sharia compliant product, or they do have a Sharia compliant department within the bank. So when we talk about Islamic windows, we look at your bigger banks that offer Islamic products, and generally what you do have there is their own Sharia management board, their own ulama that manages that part of the department, and then they ensure. And the good thing about Islamic windows, and we've touched on this in our previous podcast, is that what this allows a lot of our clients and a lot of the people in the market to do is to be able to get a Sharia compliant product, but also to access the existing infrastructure that that particular bank or finance house has. We're talking about ATMs, we're talking about bankers, we're talking about up to service fees and all of those. So if you've got a established institution, established bank that's been around for years, and now they're offering a product that speaks to your religious beliefs, and I can access those products but still get the benefits of utilizing the modern infrastructure that is in place, whether it be online banking, whether it be having a private banker or business banker, etc. So you get all those benefits. So just banking Islamically doesn't mean that you're behind or you don't get that additional benefits that you would have gotten if you had to bank conventionally. I hope that answers your question now.
No, 100%. It actually does. No, it does. It does. And just to go back to Shamim, no, I actually didn't know there's a Sharia compliant savings account. But it's not like really a conversation that's generally spoken on in my social circle, my work circle. Everything is halal circle.
Yeah, and it's a good point. If I can just jump in here again, Shabib. It's a sad reality, and I've got to mention it, is that a lot of our people, a lot of our Muslims within Cape Town, within the broader South Africa, they don't know these products exist. And, perhaps the institution is partly to blame in terms of the marketing of these products and how we market to the clients. But we also have to look at the dynamics of the country. If we look at the broader dynamics, we will look at, we're probably only about 5% of the Muslim population. So, and Islamic banking, although it's not strictly for Muslims, it's there for those, for Muslims to engage or to take up in terms of those products. So I do think a lot of work needs to be done within the industry, from an education point of view, from a marketing point of view. And we do have different levels where people say, look, they never heard about Islamic banking and they never heard about these products. And then you do have people that have heard about Islamic banking, but they got no idea what it entails. And then you do have people at different levels where they say, look, I know an Islamic savings account and Islamic investment account exists, but I got no clue how it works. It looks exactly the same as the conventional. Is it a play of words? Are we changing the word interest to profit? And these are the type of questions we get in the community. And, it might be simple to us in terms of us being in the financial industry, but it's valid questions that needs to be answered. So hopefully with this podcast and podcast to come, we'll unpack those concepts, and perhaps, explore some of those Islamic concepts going forward.
100%, Siraj. You took quite a few words out of my mouth here. And yeah, just to add on to that, hopefully we can extend this platform and what we call this bridge to many Muslims and non-Muslims out there to take advantage of the offerings that are in the system that the institutions are offering under the Sharia banking and investment world. On that note, we've come to the end to another one of our podcasts. Thank you for joining us. Please feel free to share and like the video. Please forward it on to your friends and family. If you feel that will benefit them as well, that will be great for us. And like the button from us here in the MuslimFin studio. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.